I never planned to tell anyone what happened that night. For 10 years I carried the secret alone. Not my parents. Not my husband. Not even my best friend knew the truth. Every time I looked in the mirror, I saw a frightened 19-year-old girl staring back at me. A girl whose life changed forever in a single night. And the worst part? The world outside kept moving like nothing ever happened. While inside me, everything was still stuck in that moment. People called me normal. They said I was strong. They said I had moved on. But they had no idea what I was living with every single day. Because some nights don't end when the sun rises. Some nights stay with you forever. My name is Emily. And 10 years ago, I was just a 19-year-old college student trying to survive life. Not live it, just survive it. My mornings started before sunrise. I would rush out of a small rented room, grab a cheap breakfast, and catch the bus to college. Then straight to my part-time job in the evening. Then late night studying until my eyes burned. That was my life. Tired but hopeful. Because I believed something my father always said. Hard work never goes wasted. I held on to that belief like it was my only support in this world. My family wasn't rich. Every rupee mattered. Every opportunity mattered. And I wanted to make my parents proud. To give them a life they never had. To prove that their struggles meant something. But I didn't know. Sometimes the very opportunities we trust the most can hide the darkest traps. It started like any normal day. A charity event was being held at a luxury hotel outside the city. I was there as a volunteer through my college program, helping with registration, arranging tables, serving guests. Nothing special, just another long day of work. The hall was full of important people, businessmen in expensive suits, politicians shaking hands, rich donors smiling for cameras. And in the center of it all was him, Richard. Everyone knew his name. Everyone respected him. He was the man who donated to schools, who funded hospitals, who stood on stages and talked about helping the community. People treated him like a hero. And honestly, I believed them too. Because when the whole world praises someone, you stop thinking they could ever be dangerous. That's the mistake I made. The mistake I would regret for the rest of my life. I remember the first time he spoke to me. I was standing alone near the registration desk, holding a stack of papers, trying not to mess anything up. I was nervous. My hands were shaking slightly. Then I heard a voice behind me. Emily, right? I turned around. It was Richard. Smiling. Calm. Confident. Like he already knew me. My heart skipped a beat. Yes, that's me, I replied softly. He smiled wider. I've seen you working hard at these events. People like you are rare. That sentence. It should have felt normal. But somehow it didn't. Felt too personal. Like he had been watching me longer than I realized. But I ignored that feeling. Because he was Richard. Everyone trusted him. So why wouldn't I? Over the next few weeks, I kept seeing him at different events. Every time he would talk to me, ask about my studies, ask about my family, ask about my future plans. First it felt like kindness. Then it started feeling like something else. Something I couldn't explain. But I pushed those thoughts away. Because in my world, people like him didn't have bad intentions. At least, that's what I told myself. Then came the night that changed everything. The night I still see when I close my eyes. The night I can never forget. But what happened after the event was the moment my entire life began to break in ways I didn't understand yet. And I had no idea that I was walking straight into a truth that would stay buried for 10 long years. That night started like every other exhausting day. The charity event ended late, around midnight. The hotel hall slowly emptied. Chairs were being folded. Lights were dimming one by one. And I was still there helping clean up. My body was tired. My mind was blank. All I wanted was to go home, take a shower, and sleep. But then I realized something terrible. My phone battery was dead. No ride. No transport app. and the area outside the hotel was almost completely empty. Just silence and darkness. I remember standing near the back exit, holding my bag tightly, thinking what to do next. That's when I heard footsteps behind me. Slow, confident, like the person already knew I wouldn't leave. I turned around, and I saw him, Richard, smiling like always. "Still here?" he asked casually. I forced a small smile. "Yes, my phone died. I'm waiting for a ride." He nodded slowly, as if he had been waiting for that answer. "You shouldn't wait alone this late," he said. "I'll drop you home." For a second I hesitated. Something inside me whispered to refuse. But another voice, louder, more logical, took over. "He is a respected man. Everyone trusts him. What could possibly go wrong?" So I nodded. "Okay, thank you." That was the moment everything started falling apart. The car ride felt normal at first. Too normal. The city lights passed slowly outside the window. Soft music played in the background. Richard talked calmly, asking about my day, my studies, my future. I answered politely, trying not to seem rude. But something felt off. A strange silence between his words. Like every question had a hidden meaning. When we reached a quieter road, I noticed something. He didn't take the usual route to my home. At first, I thought maybe he was just avoiding traffic. But minutes passed, and the road became unfamiliar. Empty. Dark. No shops. No people. Only trees on both sides. My heart started beating faster. "Sir, this isn't the way to my house," I said softly. He smiled without looking at me. "I know a shortcut." That's when fear entered my chest. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just a quiet sinking feeling. But I still didn't speak, because I didn't want to believe what my mind was starting to think. The car finally stopped near a deserted area. No lights. No houses. Just silence. My hands were shaking now. "Why did we stop here?" I asked. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he turned off the engine. The sound of silence became unbearable. Then he finally spoke. "Relax, Emily." That's it. Just 2 words. But the way he said them, it wasn't comforting. It was controlling. What happened after that night is something I still struggle to put into words. Because some memories don't feel like memories. They feel like scars. Not on the body, but on the mind. When I finally escaped and reached home later that night, I didn't tell anyone. Not my parents. Not my friends. I just locked myself in my room and sat in silence, staring at the wall, trying to understand what had just happened. But no matter how much I tried, my mind kept repeating one thought. No one will believe me. And slowly, that thought became my truth. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. And I stayed silent. Because the world outside still saw him as a hero. And I was just a college girl with no proof. So I buried it. Deep inside me. Where no one could see it. Not even me. But secrets don't stay buried forever. They wait. And one day, they come back. And I had no idea mine was about to return in the most unexpected way. After that night, I thought my life would slowly return to normal. But it never did. Some wounds don't heal. They just learn how to stay silent. For months, I lived like a shadow of myself. I went to college. I went to work. I smiled when I had to. But inside, I was broken in ways I couldn't explain to anyone. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw flashes of that night. Not details. Just feelings. Fear. Confusion. Helplessness. And worst of all, silence. Because I never told anyone. Not a single person. I convinced myself it was over. That if I ignored it long enough, it would disappear. But I was wrong. One morning, everything changed. It started with a simple notification. An email from my college. Internship opportunity reminder. First, I didn't think much of it. But the name attached to the program made my heart stop for a second. Richard's Foundation. I stared at the screen. For a moment I couldn't breathe properly. My hands turned cold. After everything, I thought I had escaped him. But now, his world was back in front of me. And worse, he was still everywhere. Still respected. Still praised. Still untouchable. I wanted to ignore it. Delete the email. Forget everything. But something inside me wouldn't let me. 'Cause deep down, a question had started growing inside my mind. A question I had buried for years. What if I wasn't wrong? That thought scared me more than anything else. 'Cause if I was right, then everything I had done for 10 years, my silence, my fear, my suffering, it all meant something very different. A few days later, I made a decision I still don't fully understand. I opened the foundation website. Everything looked perfect. Photos of smiling students, charity events, awards, Richard standing on stage shaking hands with politicians. The same image, the same perfect mask. But then I noticed something strange. One section of the website listed past volunteers. I started scrolling. Names I didn't recognize. Until I saw one name that made my stomach drop. Maya Collins. Something about it felt familiar. I clicked on it, but the profile page was missing. Deleted. Or hidden. That's when I felt it again. That same feeling from 10 years ago. Something wasn't right. That night I couldn't sleep. My thoughts kept spinning. Why was that name removed? Why did the foundation feel so controlled? And why was I suddenly remembering things I had forced myself to forget? I got up, turned on my laptop and searched everything I could about Richard. Articles, news, old interviews. Everything painted the same picture. Perfect man. A community hero. A respected leader. But the more I searched, the more something felt off. There were too many gaps. Too many missing details. Too many questions nobody asked. And that's when I saw it. A small comment on an old forum post. Just one line. People only see what he wants them to see. No name. No explanation. But it felt like it was written for me. My heart started beating faster. 'Cause suddenly, I realized something terrifying. I was not the only one who had doubts. I was just the only one who stayed silent. And then came the moment that changed everything again. A knock on my door. Late at night. Slow. Heavy. 3 knocks. I froze. Because no one ever visited me that late. I walked slowly toward the door. My hands shaking. My breath uneven. And when I opened it, I saw something that made my entire body go cold. Someone was standing there, holding an old envelope. And they said just one sentence. You don't know the full truth about Richard, but I do. And in that moment, everything I buried for 10 years started coming back to life. I didn't move for a few seconds. My hand stayed frozen on the door handle. My mind refused to accept what I was seeing. A stranger. And my door. Late at night. Holding an old, slightly torn envelope. The street behind him was empty. No cars. No voices. Only silence. Who are you? I finally asked, my voice barely steady. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked around nervously like he was afraid someone was watching. Then he spoke quietly. My name doesn't matter. What matters is what's inside this envelope. My heart started beating faster. I don't understand, I said. He stepped forward slightly. You will. And then he placed the envelope in my hands. Before I could ask anything else, he turned and walked away. Fast. Like he didn't want to be seen. Within seconds, he disappeared into the darkness. And I was left standing there alone, holding something that felt heavier than it should have. I closed the door slowly, locked it, then leaned against it, trying to calm my breathing. But my hands were shaking too much. I looked down at the envelope. No name. No address. Just my name written on the front. Emily. Written in bold, uneven handwriting. Like someone had written it in a hurry. Or with fear. For a long moment I didn't open it. because deep down I already knew. Whatever was inside was going to change everything again. But curiosity is a dangerous thing. It doesn't wait for courage. It forces you forward. Slowly, I opened it. Inside was a photograph. An old one, faded at the edges. It showed a charity event. A crowded hall. People smiling, clapping. And there he was, Richard, standing at the center. But that wasn't what made my hands go cold. It was what was happening in the background. Someone had circled a figure behind him. A man holding a camera, standing near a pillar, watching everything. And below the photo, a handwritten note. He is never alone. Someone always watches. My breath stopped for a second. I stared at that line again and again. Someone always watches. What did that even mean? Who took this photo? And why send it to me after 10 years? I sat on the floor, still holding the envelope, trying to make sense of it. But my mind was already spinning, because something strange was happening inside me. Memories I had buried were starting to return. Not clear, not complete, but fragments. A car, a dark road, a door closing, voices I couldn't fully hear. I pressed my hands to my head. No, stop, I whispered to myself. But it didn't stop. It kept coming, like something had been unlocked. The next morning I called in sick to college. I couldn't function. I couldn't focus. All I could think about was the envelope. And that sentence. He is never alone. That day I did something I never thought I would do. I searched for Richard again. But this time I didn't look at public information. I looked deeper. Old records. Archived news. Deleted pages. And after hours of searching, I found something unusual. A small mention in an old article about security concerns at certain charity events. There was a name listed. A private security contractor. But the page had been partially removed, like someone had tried to erase it. The name was barely visible. Daniel Cross. Something about it felt important. I didn't know why, but I saved it immediately, because for the first time in 10 years, I felt something I hadn't felt since that night. Not fear, not silence, but movement, like the truth was finally starting to wake up. That evening my phone rang. Unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. A man's voice came through. Low, careful. And the first thing he said was, "You opened the envelope, didn't you?" My blood turned cold. I didn't answer. He continued. "I know what happened to you 10 years ago, Emily. And I know who was watching that night." My grip tightened on the phone. "Who are you?" I asked again. A pause. Then he said something that made my world tilt slightly. "I worked security that night. And I have something you were never meant to see." And just like that, the secret I buried for 10 years was no longer mine alone. I couldn't sleep that night. The phone call kept replaying in my mind again and again. I worked security that night. That one sentence destroyed every thought I had tried to bury for 10 years. Because if he was telling the truth, then it meant one thing. That night was not as empty as I remembered. It had been watched, recorded, and possibly hidden. I sat on my bed until sunrise, staring at the wall, trying to convince myself it was a mistake, a prank, or someone confused. But deep down I knew something was different this time. This wasn't random. This was connected. To Richard. To the envelope. To everything I had started remembering. The next morning I called the number again. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped my phone. After 3 rings he answered. "Emily," he said calmly, like he was expecting me. "Who are you?" I asked immediately. "Tell me everything." A long pause. Then he spoke. "My name is Daniel. I worked private security for events years ago, including that charity night." My heart tightened. He continued. "I didn't contact you earlier because I was afraid. Richard had influence everywhere. People who asked questions disappeared from opportunities. Some even lost their jobs. I stayed silent because I had felt that fear too. The fear of not being believed. The fear of consequences. The fear that kept me silent for 10 years. Then he said something that made my stomach drop. "We weren't just there for protection," Daniel said. "We were also told to monitor certain guests and certain interactions." "What do you mean?" I asked quietly. Another pause. Then he said, "Because that night wasn't normal. There were instructions. Specific instructions. And Richard made sure certain moments were never documented properly." My throat went dry. "What moments?" I asked. Daniel lowered his voice. "Your ride home." Silence. Heavy silence. The kind that feels like the air disappears. I stood up immediately. "No, that's not possible," I said. "There were so many people there." "Exactly," he interrupted. "But not everyone was watching everything. And some footage was removed." My heart started racing. "Removed by who?" I asked. He hesitated, then said, "By people protecting him." That was the moment everything inside me shifted. Because for 10 years I believed I was alone in that memory. That no one saw it. That nothing existed. But now, I was hearing the opposite. That something did exist. And it was hidden. Daniel finally said, "I have a copy of something, but I can't send it online. It's too sensitive. If you want answers, meet me." I froze. "Where?" I asked. He gave me a location. An old abandoned cafe on the edge of the city. Then he added one final warning. "And Emily, if Richard finds out you're looking into this, he will try to stop it again." My grip tightened. Again. That word stayed with me. Again. So it wasn't the first time. Someone had tried before. And failed. Or stopped. That evening I stood in front of the mirror for a long time. I barely recognized myself anymore. Not because of how I looked, but because of what I was becoming. The scared 19-year-old girl inside me was still there. But for the first time, she wasn't alone. Something inside me had started to change. Fear was still there. But now it was mixed with something else. Anger, clarity, and truth. As I left my house that night, I had no idea what I was walking into. Only one thought kept repeating in my mind. If there really is evidence, then everything I believed for 10 years is about to collapse. And I was finally ready to face it, even if it destroyed everything. The cafe was almost falling apart. Old wooden tables, broken chairs, dust everywhere. It looked like a place that had been forgotten by time itself. I arrived early. My heart was beating so fast I could hear it in my ears. Every passing car made me flinch. Every shadow felt like someone watching me. I kept asking myself one question. Am I doing the right thing? But deep down, I already knew the answer. I had come too far to turn back now. At exactly 7:15 p.m. I saw him. Daniel. He walked in slowly, like someone who hadn't been in public for a long time. He looked around before sitting across from me. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Then he opened a small black bag and placed something on the table. A USB drive. My breath caught. "This is it," he said quietly. My hands didn't move. "What is inside it?" I asked. He looked at me seriously. Footage from that night. The world around me went silent. Even the cafe noise faded in my mind. Why do you have this?" I whispered. Daniel leaned forward. "Because I was there. And I saw things that never made it into official records." My heart felt like it stopped for a second. I stared at the USB drive for a long time. It looked so small. But it carried something massive. Something powerful. Something dangerous. Finally I asked, "Why give it to me after 10 years?" Daniel hesitated. Then said something I will never forget. "Because I couldn't protect you back then. But I can't stay silent anymore." That night I went home and locked my door twice. My hands were shaking as I plugged the USB into my laptop. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then the file opened. A grainy video appeared on the screen. A charity hall. People moving around. Laughing. Talking. The same event. My breath got stuck. And then I saw myself. 19-year-old me. Standing near the exit. Holding my bag. Waiting. My eyes filled instantly. It felt like watching a memory from someone else's life. But it was me. The video continued. Richard appeared. Walking toward me. Smiling. Talking. Everything looked normal at first. But then something happened that made my entire body freeze. The camera angle shifted slightly. And for the first time, I noticed something I never remembered. A man near the hallway. Holding a camera. Watching closely. Not casually. Not randomly. But deliberately. Like he was recording everything. My heart started racing. 'Cause Daniel was right. Someone was watching. Everything. The video showed Richard offering me a ride. I watched myself nod. I watched myself leave. And then the footage cut to another angle. A car leaving the parking lot. Following distance. Controlled. Intentional. My hands went cold. This can't be real, I whispered. But it was. It was all there. And then I saw something even worse. A timestamp glitch. A cut in the recording. Like parts had been removed. But not perfectly hidden. Just erased enough to raise questions. Daniel had warned me. Some footage was removed. Now I understood what he meant. Someone didn't just watch that night. They controlled what was remembered. I sat on the floor, unable to move. Tears were falling without me realizing. Not just from pain, but from truth. For 10 years I thought I was alone. For 10 years I thought I was imagining things. But now, I had proof. Real proof. And it changed everything. My phone suddenly rang. Unknown number again. My whole body froze. I didn't want to answer. But I did. A familiar voice came through. Calm. Cold. Controlled. Emily, the voice said. My blood turned to ice. It was Richard. And before I could say anything, he said the words that shattered everything I had just discovered. I think you've been looking at things you shouldn't have. For a moment I couldn't speak. My fingers went numb. My throat felt completely blocked. Richard's voice was calm, too calm. Like he wasn't surprised. Like he already knew everything. I think you've been looking at things you shouldn't have, he repeated slowly. My heart was pounding so loudly I could barely hear him properly. How did you get this number? I finally managed to say. A small pause. Then a soft chuckle. Emily, after all these years you still ask small questions. That sentence hit me harder than anything else. Because it wasn't just a response. It sounded like control. Like he still had power over me even now. I stood up immediately, holding the phone tightly. Stay away from me, I said firmly. Another pause. Then his voice changed slightly. Still calm but sharper. You don't understand what you're doing. I understand enough, I replied, my voice shaking but stronger than before. A long silence followed. Then he said something that froze my entire body. Do you really think that video is complete? My grip tightened. What does that mean? I asked. But he didn't answer directly. Instead he said, You've been quiet for 10 years, Emily. Stay quiet a little longer. It's better for you. And then the line cut. I stood there staring at my phone. My hands were shaking uncontrollably. Not just from fear, but confusion. Do you really think that video is complete? Those words kept repeating in my mind. What did he mean? Was there more? Or was he trying to scare me? I couldn't sit still. I went back to my laptop immediately, opened the USB again, played the video, watched it frame by frame, looking for anything I missed. And then I noticed something strange. At the edge of the footage, a reflection. In a glass door near the hallway, a figure standing behind the camera operator. Watching. Not moving. just observing everything. My breath stopped, because I had seen that presence before, but never paid attention. I called Daniel instantly. He picked up after 2 rings. "Did you watch it?" he asked immediately. "Yes," I said quickly. "Richard just called me. He knows." Silence on the other end. Then Daniel said quietly, "Then it's worse than I thought." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" I asked. He hesitated, then said, "Richard wasn't acting alone that night." My mind went blank. "What?" "There was someone above him," Daniel continued. "Someone making sure everything stayed controlled. That's why certain parts were erased. That's why no one ever spoke." My legs felt weak. "Who?" I whispered. Daniel's voice lowered. "I don't know the name, but I know the role. A fixer." I sat down immediately. My whole body felt cold, because now this wasn't just about one man. It wasn't just Richard anymore. It was something bigger, something organized, something protected. Daniel continued, "Emily, if you keep digging, they won't just try to silence the truth." My heart was racing. "They'll try to erase it completely." That night I couldn't sleep at all. Every sound outside my window felt suspicious. Every shadow felt like someone watching. And for the first time in 10 years, I wasn't just afraid of remembering the past. I was afraid of what remembering it could bring. Because now I understood something very clearly. This was no longer about what happened that night. It was about who had been hiding it ever since. And I was no longer invisible to them. After that night, everything in my life changed. Not slowly, not gently, but all at once. It felt like I had stepped into a storm I could no longer step out of. Richard knew I was digging. That thought alone made my stomach tighten every time I picked up my phone. Every unknown number felt like him. Every notification felt like a warning. And yet, I couldn't stop. Because now it wasn't just fear inside me anymore. It was something stronger. Truth. The next morning Daniel called again. This time his voice was different. Urgent. "Don't go anywhere alone today," he said immediately. My heart jumped. "Why?" He paused, then said, "They started asking questions about you." I froze. "Who?" Another pause. Then, "People connected to Richard's foundation." My hands went cold instantly. "How do they even know I'm involved?" I asked. Daniel replied in a low voice, "Because they monitor everything that threatens them." For a moment I just sat there in silence. My mind couldn't process it. 10 years of silence. And now suddenly I was on their radar? It didn't make sense. Or maybe it made too much sense. That afternoon, something unexpected happened. I received an official invitation from Richard's foundation, a special appreciation event. My name was printed on it, professionally designed, perfectly polite, like nothing had ever happened. But my hands started shaking the moment I saw it, because it felt like a message, not an invitation, a signal. I called Daniel immediately. "I got an invite," I said. There was silence on the line. Then he said something I didn't expect. "Go." I blinked. "What?" "Go," he repeated. "But don't go as the same person you were 10 years ago." I didn't understand. "What are you saying?" His voice became serious. "This is the first mistake they've made." My heart started beating faster. "What mistake?" "They acknowledged you," he said. "That means they're reacting." That night I couldn't think straight. Part of me wanted to throw the invitation away. Run away from everything. Go back to silence. Go back to normal life. But that version of me, the 19-year-old girl who stayed quiet for 10 years, she didn't exist the same way anymore. Something had changed inside me. The event was scheduled for 2 days later. And those 2 days felt like a countdown to something I couldn't name. On the morning of the event, I stood in front of my mirror for a long time. I didn't see fear anymore. I saw something else. Awareness. and pain that had turned into clarity. When I arrived at the venue, everything looked exactly like before. Same luxury hall. Same decorations. Same smiling faces. Same polished image. Richard's world still looked perfect from the outside. But I knew better now. Perfect things usually hide the worst truths. As I stepped inside, people turned to look at me. Some smiled politely. Some didn't recognize me. And some paused for a second too long, like they felt something familiar, but couldn't place it. Then I saw him, Richard, standing near the stage, surrounded by important guests, laughing, shaking hands, performing the same image he had built for years, the same mask. But this time, I didn't look away. For the first time in 10 years, I looked directly at him, and he noticed. Our eyes met across the room, and his smile changed slightly. Not gone, not broken, just measured, like he was calculating something, like he finally understood I wasn't the same girl anymore. Then he raised his glass slightly, a silent acknowledgement. And in that moment, I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't just an event. This was a test. And I had no idea that the real truth was not in the past anymore. It was about to come out in front of everyone. The moment our eyes met, I felt it immediately. Not fear this time. Not confusion. Something sharper. Awareness. Because Richard wasn't surprised to see me. He was prepared. That realization made my stomach tighten. This wasn't an invitation out of kindness. It was controlled. Intentional. And I had walked straight into it. The event hall was full. Cameras flashing. People laughing. Music playing softly in the background. But for me, everything sounded distant, like I was underwater. I kept watching him. Every movement. Every smile. Every handshake. Trying to understand what he was planning. And then I noticed something strange. People around him weren't just guests. They were watching him closely. Not like fans, like staff, like security, like they were waiting for instructions. My heart slowed for a second. Daniel was right. This wasn't just one man. There was a system behind him. I slowly moved toward the side of the hall, trying not to attract attention. That's when my phone vibrated. A message from an unknown number. Don't react to him. He is watching your response, not your presence. My breath stopped. Another message came instantly. Go to the back corridor. Now. My hand started shaking. I looked around. No one seemed focused on me. Except one man near the stage. A man I didn't recognize. Black suit. Earpiece. Not smiling. Just observing. I turned away slowly and walked toward the corridor. My heart was pounding so loudly I thought someone could hear it. The corridor was dim, empty, quiet, too quiet. And then I saw him, Daniel, standing near a service door. He looked tense. Why did you come inside like that? He whispered immediately. I didn't have a choice, I said. He looked at me for a moment, then said, then it's already started. My stomach dropped. What has started? I asked. Daniel didn't answer immediately. Instead, he pulled out a small device. A recorder. It's live, he said. Everything happening inside is being monitored. My mind went blank. Monitored by who? I asked. Daniel looked at me directly. By the same people who protected Richard for years. My chest tightened. So this whole event? A setup, he interrupted. My breath shook. For what? I whispered. Daniel hesitated, then said something that made my entire body freeze. To see if you would break. Before I could respond, a sudden sound came from the hall. Applause. Loud. Controlled. Like something important had just happened. Daniel quickly looked toward the door. They're calling you, he said. My heart dropped. Calling me. He nodded slowly. Richard is speaking about you right now. I felt my body go cold. What is he saying? I asked. Daniel's face tightened. Come and see. We moved back toward the hall entrance quietly. I peeked inside. And that's when I saw it. Richard standing on stage, microphone in hand, smiling, and saying my name. 10 years ago, he said calmly to the crowd, there was a misunderstanding involving a young volunteer. My breathing stopped. The entire room was silent. Today, he continued, she is here with us. Every eye in the room slowly turned toward me. My heart felt like it dropped into my stomach. I stepped back instinctively, but there was nowhere to go, because in that moment, I realized something terrifying. This was not an apology. This was not a confession. This was a public control moment, and I had just been pulled into the center of it. Richard looked directly at me, still smiling, and said softly into the microphone, Emily, come up here. And the entire hall waited for my next move. Emily, come up here. Richard's voice echoed through the hall like a command, not a request. Every eye was on me. Cameras slowly turned. Whispers started spreading. And for a moment I felt like I was 19 again, frozen, silent, trapped under everyone's gaze. But something inside me didn't break this time. It stood up. Daniel grabbed my arm slightly from behind. Don't go unless you're ready, he whispered. I looked at him. Then I looked at the stage. Richard was still smiling, like he was in control of the entire room, like nothing in his world could ever fall apart. But this time, I knew something he didn't. I had proof. I slowly started walking forward. Each step felt heavier than the last. The hall was silent now. Even the music had stopped. Only the sound of my footsteps echoed. Tap, tap, tap. Until I reached the stage. Richard held out his hand. Come, he said softly. I didn't take it. Instead, I looked at him. Directly. For the first time in 10 years. No fear. No silence. Just truth building up inside me. You called me here, I said calmly, so I will speak. A small shift happened in his expression. Just for a second. But I saw it. I turned toward the crowd. Hundreds of faces. People who once believed his perfect image. People who had no idea what was coming. And I said, you all know Richard as a hero. A pause. But you don't know what happened 10 years ago. A murmur spread through the hall. Richard stepped slightly closer. Emily, he warned quietly. But I didn't stop. I stayed silent for 10 years. I continued, voice shaking but strong. Because I thought no one would believe me. I reached into my bag. My hands were shaking. But I pulled it out. The USB. The evidence. The truth. Daniel had already connected it to the system backstage. And at that exact moment, the screen behind Richard flickered. The crowd went silent again. Because the video started playing. The real footage. The night. The car. The ride. The missing pieces. Everything. Gasps filled the room. People stood up. Whispers turned into shock. Phones started recording. Richard turned around slowly. For the first time, his smile disappeared. This is edited, he said quickly. This is manipulated. No, Daniel's voice came from the side of the hall. He stepped forward. This is original security footage. And I have backup logs from that night. Another wave of shock spread. People started whispering louder. Richard looked around now. Not confident anymore. Not in control. For the first time, he looked exposed. Then I spoke again. You built your entire life on silence, I said. But silence ends today. A long pause. Then I added. And I was never alone. You just made sure I thought I was. The room erupted. Security moved. Journalists rushed forward. People started asking questions at once. The perfect image was breaking in real time. Right in front of everyone. Richard tried to step forward, but Daniel blocked him. You've controlled enough, Daniel said firmly. And for the first time, Richard had no answer. No smile. No mask. Nothing. I stood there shaking slightly, but finally breathing properly, because after 10 years of silence, the truth was no longer mine alone. It belonged to the world now. As I walked down from the stage, Daniel said quietly, "It's over." I looked back once. The hall was chaos, but inside me, there was peace. Not because everything was perfect, but because I was no longer silent. Final message. Some truths take years to surface, but when they do, no power, no image, no lie can survive them. And for the first time in 10 years, Emily was finally free.